Well, hey, how's it going? Thanks for stopping by. I'm James, and today I'm talking about 4 Minutes by Andrews and why do I keep forgetting this name? Wilson. They're a writing pair, Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson. Primarily write thrillers, and I don't know why I found this book. I think I was actually looking at other thrillers that they had written, and this one popped up. But it's a time travel story, and I like time travel. I also mostly like thrillers, although I don't read them a lot, but I'm always looking at ways. I like books that just do things in different ways. Like I'll even read romance. I read The Fourth Wing last year, the whole whole series up until where it currently is at. And yeah, try to just read broadly to see what I can learn. 4 Minutes is definitely a thriller. It's about Navy special operators who get caught up in a new technology. And basically what it is that you can travel up to 28 days in the future, but you can only stay for 4 minutes. And according to the internet, this idea was developed for a streaming show, and it definitely has the feelings of it's very visual. There are parts of it that would lend themselves well to moving action in a TV show or giving information through like a board with putting, laying out the map of what happened and things like that. Because every time they jump into a situation or jump into the future, the first thing they're doing is just gathering information and then bringing it back. And then they have to try and piece together how some bad event happened. The challenge with this whole idea, one of the things I thought was kind of funny about this book was every time I would get to a point where I'm kind of like, that how would that even work? How do they do that? The characters actually ask that question quite often. And then the story will have to explain why they do something. And there's a lot of constraints in the time travel. Only humans, well, equipment can go forward and equipment can go back, but for some reason it fries hard drives and electronic equipment, so they can wear like their body armor and knives and rifles and stuff like that, but they can't take a camera into the future and bring it back. They can't bring a hard drive back, so that's kind of a weird constraint. And then also they get aged by the process of moving forward, and that's also one of the things that about the story that gets a little frustrating, I guess, is the information flow. But I think that is a function of it being a thriller. There's also some inconsistency in some of the characters, and I would really be curious to hear about their writing process and if they swap chapters, if one person writes the book and another person edits it, because it starts out with a prologue that is from the point of view of the person that's going to become the program director, who supposedly has a lot of answers. And you're in that person's mind a lot, but the reader never gets those answers. And also, they seem really petty in the beginning. And then as the character progresses, like they're not, and they're doing things for logical reasons, but you just don't get those reasons as the reader. And so that gets a little frustrating. Like you're bouncing between the members of the team, you get things from their points of view, and then the director, and then, you know, smashing those characters together to do things. It is definitely a thriller, and it is definitely like a Navy SEAL type of characters and story. It opens with, there's the prologue where the director is talking to a general in Arlington. And so all the trappings are there of the way kind of a major, national or international conspiracy might be set up. And then you move to an operation where Navy SEALs are going to grab an insurgent in Mali. And inside the main character's mind, he is very, like, he's just focused on his mission, and that is all he cares about. And there's some violent stuff in the very beginning that I wouldn't let that throw you off, because it actually doesn't get repeated later on in the book. But I think for anybody coming to this who doesn't normally read thrillers, there's some violence there that might be like, whoa, okay. But that doesn't really happen again. So that happens, like, they observe some weird stuff during that operation. Some of his friends die. he definitely has an emotional response to his friends dying, but a lot of things are kind of just said, and mainly having to do with like how families work in the military, how the idea of brotherhood works in the military. And I really think that it's it's sort of shorthand probably for what is already a trope in the genre. So when you're reading a military thriller, like you don't really have to get into the whys of brotherhood in in that kind of unit. Like they once they gel, they have a bond that will last, their whole lives. But it still is just kind of like overtly stated as opposed to showing it. But then they do things to show the team coming together as the story progresses. But it felt a little on the nose. And then there's a woman character that as she's introduced, there's just a whole chapter of how she's a badass. And that felt a little like, okay, we got to get out the way here that she's cool and you shouldn't think that she is was given her job or something. And she was a great character, like throughout the story. Like everything she did made sense. She cares about people. She's competent. And if anything, she got a little nerfed because she gets, when it comes to the actual act of traveling forward, they have to go into basically a giant MRI machine, and it's a very claustrophobic space. And all of a sudden, she has claustrophobia. So that's a thing that she has to deal with, which I think might have been something they did. The story seems to always be looking for ways to make it hard to move into the future. And and that's fine. I think you always need to have obstacles for your characters and even smaller obstacles compared to, huge ones. I really liked some of the development of a few characters. In particular, there was a Delta Force operator who's kind of a goofy guy that is one of those that is full of information and is basically anytime somebody says something, he'll be like, actually, and then, go off about that. But then it also turns out that he's kind of a stone cold killer. and and so those parts, like they say that early on that, I'm really good at killing people. It's the other thing I'm really good at aside from remembering things. And so you're like, okay, but I kind of like you because you're funny and you say funny things. And then later on, there's a sequence where, oh yeah, he proves that he can do that. And they're all kind of like, whoa. Um, so that was definitely entertaining. And if it had been, a TV show, it would have been that's a great character for, some actor to play with. Some of the other characters didn't get as much screen time. Like, well, they got screen time and things happened to them. The character stuff that would make them interesting, I think they didn't get as much of that. And I would have loved to seen more. So basically by the midpoint of the book, like we've gotten into, okay, this technology exists. We have used it a few times. We've seen what's weird about it. I really liked the opening sequence when they're getting to the training facility and they get a PowerPoint presentation on on the tech and what it does. And I thought that was like very true to what would happen in an actual situation, like where the director has to make a PowerPoint presentation to teach them how to use this tech. But then basically the main event happens in the middle where the main threat is established and they're going to have to do something about it. The other thing that's been happening throughout this time, like developing, is that while they're like you could probably say the blue team, there is a red team in another location. And they're also jumping forward into the future and also getting information. And the reader knows that. But the characters, it takes them a long time to figure out that there's another team. Like it's even stated in the prologue that the director and the general in charge of the program are worried that there could, like, what would happen if there was another team? Like, it's just said. And then there is another team, but nobody really thinks about that as all this other kind of weird things start happening. And it really seems that somebody else knows what they're doing before they do it. And yeah, there could be a leak in the facility, but the facility is hardened and they've taken all these steps to protect it. Why doesn't somebody else have the tech? So that was a little like, as it was progressing. And it's one of those things where if they knew somebody else had the tech, it would have been cool to see them try and solve that problem, because it basically becomes kind of a problem of branching futures. And this is one thing that the science fictional problem doesn't really engage with. Like it does sort of suggest predestination because they're jumping forward into a future that they do say can change, but both teams are jumping forward into the same future. Whereas, in other multi, universe theories and whatnot, like anytime you would do that, you'd be moving forward into a different future that had different possibilities and different changes. And that's fine. I think with time travel, you kind of have to pin it, like, this is what we're going to do and we're moving forward with it. Rule of cool, just do it. So I think this book also does a really good job of, once it establishes that main problem, of adding other obstacles that make sense, because the bad guys are doing things that make sense to actually affect them. They're not doing stupid things. And I really like that about the story. And I thought that was definitely something to learn from. I got a little frustrated with the main character because there's a family subplot that's added, sort of what it seems like, so the bad guys can capitalize on the family. But he's not a great dad, and it doesn't make him a good character. And it felt like that was a thing that could have been maybe slightly different. Like, he could have still been married. He could have still been caring for his family. I don't know. But of course he's divorced. And of course he doesn't get along with his ex-wife. Of course they have a strained relationship and don't communicate. And maybe that's a trope about operators, but I would love to see a well-adjusted operator that understands the communication problems they're dealing with and has like a functional relationship with their partner, with their spouse, right? But that's not what this is. That's fine. It moves really fast. So the structure of this book, basically 3-part structure, 50 chapters. There were 340 pages, and every chapter ended with a pretty good hook to pull you into the next chapter, even when it jumped to, another set of characters. And so I thought that made a lot of sense. It moved quickly. I actually was surprised when, like I usually do, I listen to the book, but I also switch back and forth between the text, the ebook and the audiobook. And I got to the last, quarter of the book and was kind of surprised, like, whoa, that moved fast. And then it was a matter of like, okay, they've got, 50 pages to go. What's going to happen here? Like, how is this going to get resolved or keep moving? There's a cool sequence, like basically there's an event they're trying to thwart, and it keeps, every time they do something, the bad guys move the bomb to a different place. And so they have to figure that out and go to the other place. And so that was cool. Every time they figure something out, the team has to go back to like basically the clue room and, map everything out on a board and figure it out. There is like a bit of hand wavium that gets introduced as far as like how they can affect the future and the time it takes to jump as time is still moving forward. And I really didn't try to wrap my head around that too hard. Like, it was just like, yeah, that's cool. Do that. So I liked that from a science fiction perspective. The story still had things to reveal even as we progressed. So the characters are trying to engage with the technology. It did seem a little weird that there wouldn't be scientists actually doing that, like engineers in the program that would have been figuring all those things out. But that's fine. It didn't overcomplicate the story that way. And then the way it ends, it's definitely leading into a sequel. Like, overtly, there's going to be a sequel. But this book came out in 24. There is no sequel yet. And there's no mention of it that I can find online that there's going to be a sequel. So that's a little frustrating, because I would say the ending of this book is satisfying, but also the whole denouement, kind of rising action into something else, makes you want a sequel. And so I could see that leading to bad reviews because the sequel doesn't exist yet as time goes on. But in general, it's a well-reviewed book. I think it's, sitting at almost 2,000 reviews with a 4.3 average. So most people liked it. The title is a little bit difficult. Every time I tried to search for 4 minutes on Amazon, at least, I had to start adding the author's names in order to find the book. There's a ton of stuff out there that's 4 minutes. So, cooking books and like self-help books and stuff like that. So that was a little like, the cover is cool. I like it, but it really makes me think of a video game versus a thriller. But it definitely has that silhouette, weapon on the cover, guy who looks like he's doing something, and then a portal of some kind. So all those things are there. That was something that kind of caught me. I don't know. Every time I looked at the cover, I was kind of like, that's probably not what I would have done, but whatever. It's obviously a book that's done very well, so don't listen to me on that one. as far as other things the authors are doing, they've got a series called Tier 1 that's at like 9 books now and is doing very well. And then another one called The Shepherds, which appears to try to combine the whole operator thing with kind of like paranormal. So I'd be curious like how that works. But I didn't realize in looking at some of their other stuff that they're also, it's plainly stated that they're writing or trying to write Christian thrillers, which was something I didn't know existed. In this book, like the character does say that he prays several times. I wouldn't say that he's acting in any sort of overtly Christian way, certainly in the way that he applies violence to things. But be that as it may. So that would be something interesting to study as a subgenre that maybe is not a well-served genre that might, could use more books. But that was interesting to see. So overall, would I recommend that someone check this book out? Yes, I think that if you like science fiction and you like action, you're going to like this book. It may get in your way a little bit of the Navy SEAL operator piece of it. If you like military science fiction, that will be fine for you. If you're looking for some sort of new statement about time travel or broader implications for the world, that is not going to be in this book. Like they are basically using time travel to try and head off global terrorist events or just bad things that might happen. And so it's really a story that seems stuck in the GWOT period, the Global War on Terror, where, we're global police combing the world looking for terrorists wanting to do bad to the United States, as opposed to people that might be using this technology to improve, equity across the country or, I don't know, wealth inequality or class issues or something. Like that's not what this book is doing. So don't expect that, and it's just not going to engage with those things. And that's fine. That's not what this book is. So if you go into it, I think expecting that, you'll be happy. There was another book I read last year, I think, Exordia, that was kind of an alien first contact story that opens with a really cool, like, interaction between a woman who gets, sees the alien when no one else can. And there's a whole like building up of their relationship. And then at like the quarter mark, the book just seems to completely shift gears and you end up in the heads of these operator-like people, like military officers or CIA, I can't remember exactly, who are then dealing with like the military response to the aliens when they find their ship. And you spend the whole rest of the book doing that. And it was kind of like, it felt like the book set up a promise with the beginning. I'm going to get this cool, quirky, fun story about a woman and her alien. And it shifts to how the government's trying to respond to a spaceship that defies all of our laws of physics and infects people when they touch it. So that was a little like, I feel like this book is very clear throughout what it is, what it promises, and that is probably a really, good thing about it. Its blurb was very much on point with what you can expect. So, but there was a few things, just quick violent things that I would probably, if you don't like that, it might be something to skip for that purpose, or just maybe at least the opening chapter. That's really where that was, not the prologue, but the opening chapter. You might breeze over that and then get to the rest of it, because it doesn't, although I think there was one point where somebody gets shot and it's described as a modernist painting across the wall or something like that. And that was kind of like, okay. So it definitely is a book that is, violence happens here. So yeah, 4 Minutes by Andrews and Wilson. I wish there was a sequel, because I would have read it. I would have jumped right into it. I don't know if I would come back and seek it out, but we'll see. So I will have the link to the book in the show notes if you're interested in checking it out. And I've got another review just recently to Holy Fire by Bruce Sterling, which I thought was great and was really engaging with ideas, in this case about aging. So if you want to check that out, that's in the channel. So, all right. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, and I will talk to you later.